So please forgive me, this is a bit ad-libbed, extemporized. Okay, so Occupy Democracy. You might have seen a bit of coverage on the media, on social media, not on the mainstream media. I think people are probably all aware that the reason why we called it Occupy Democracy, and that we shifted after 3 years our direction from the City of London to Westminster. I think in the past 3 years, a lot of people have been talking about the crisis in our political system, in particular the Westminster system of government. In the past years, we've had, for instance, the government passing legislation that nobody voted for, that didn't appear in any manifesto. Nobody voted for NHS privatisation. Nobody has voted for secret trade deals like TTIP. Nobody has voted for fracking. In fact, they want to even violate property rights of landowners so they can horizontally drill under people's land. This is the crazy extent of the way people's rights are being violated. And then the question is, well, if Parliament isn't representing us, who is it representing? And then, you know, once you ask that question, you have this institution called Parliament, which claims to be sovereign, which is the absolute power in Britain to legislate, and it is not under the control of the people who elect it. It simply does whatever it likes, and it seems to me, and many other people, that the interests that are represented in Parliament are those of corporations and a tiny wealthy elite. There is no other way you can explain these policies. If you take, for instance, the example of NHS privatisation, the Health and Social Care Act, large chunks of it just came out a bit of a scandal, large chunks of the legislation was actually drafted by management consultants from McKinsey. And what interest has McKinsey got to do with the health service? You know, they could have asked me to draft the legislation, like they asked McKinsey. Obviously, they've got better qualifications than I have, so they don't consider asking, you know, lowlifes like ourselves. So we've got this system which is entirely undemocratic. Also, we have, for instance, the City of London has a stranglehold on our democracy, not just informally, but institutionally. I bet you no one here has ever heard, who knows who the... Do you know anyone? Does anyone here know who the Remembrancer is? Oh, that's pretty high figure, because I would probably think it's less than 2% of the British population know who the Remembrancer is. He's an official who sits next to the Speaker in the House of Commons and has virtual veto powers on any legislation which may affect the interests of the City of London. It's one of the reasons why we can't have a written, codified constitution, because you'd have to draw all these, the spotlight onto all these individuals. And so we've got a real crisis in democracy, and one of the things we're trying to do is, by occupying Parliament Square, we're actually testing the limits of our democracy, because what you find out is when you attempt to exercise your democratic rights, you find yourself not just in conflict with the police, but you find yourself in conflict with these bureaucratic terror merchants called heritage wardens, who are there simply to enforce bylaws to protect the grass. Apparently, the grass has more political rights than I do, or any of you. So just be warned, if you want to exercise your democratic rights today, you will find Parliament Square surrounded by Harris fencing, guards, police, dogs, and heritage wardens, courtesy of the Mayor of London, Boris Johnson. And I think what we've shown is we've exposed this, and we've had a week of a programme of debate where we have had, you know, discussed the alternatives. Many of the issues that some of the speakers have raised have been covered. We've had economists, distinguished economists like Anne Pettifor and James Medway, their talks. I'm not going to repeat what they've said, but you can just go on our website occupiedemocracy.org.uk. It's all filmed there. It's all recordable. You can view it all. We've had Jonathan Neal talk about 1 million climate jobs, which makes a connection between the environmental crisis and the economic crisis, and how we can find practical solutions to these problems. Today, activists from Occupy Democracy presented a list of demands which we had hastily agreed last night on the final day of the occupation to present to Parliament. And later in November, we plan to reoccupy Parliament Square, and this time we'll do it with greater numbers. And I'd like to see if the mass media ignore us when we're there in our thousands.